Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, HollywoodShono here, about to give you another Clash Royale video. And this video we're going to be talking about some tips and tricks for each arena. Now, obviously, gameplay is a little bit scared at low levels because you don't have all the available cards. But this is an example of one of the decks that you would be using at Arena 1. Now, there are a couple cards that, in my opinion, are pretty high skill. That would be the Lightning. Let's just take the Fireball, for example. The Goblin Barrel. And the Skeleton Army becomes very viable. Now, I also classify Baby Dragon. Those bottom four cards are cards that are really high-tech. And, of course, at low levels, the Prince is also a very viable card because there isn't a lot of things that can really deal with it very well, especially if you have the Valkryie and a Giant in your pathing. Now, the Lightning is a very high-skill ability. At low levels, you're probably going to be using it to take out Musketeers. And you might also use it on random other things, like a mini P.E.K.K.A. But more than likely, you'd be using it for taking out Witches and Musketeers at Arena 1. Witch is a very powerful card, if you're lucky to get it. And the Prince can be good at really low ranks. Obviously, at higher levels, it gets shut down really easily, just like mini P.E.K.K.As. But at low levels, you really want to get your hands on a Prince. It will work pretty well. Now, obviously, the secret to having a deck is having cheap stuff that can defend, but also a really strong push that can actually win you the game. So Archers are really solid. Valkryie can be really good against Spear Goblins and Goblin Huts and the like. And you could have, if you get a Witch along with a Giant, that's amazing. And you probably want to have arrows in case somebody is rocking a Skeleton Army. It is rare at low levels, so you're not going to be dealing with it as much. And Goblin Barrel is high skill at low levels. You're going to have like level 6 Goblins. That's probably not worth it. But a deck like this is actually pretty solid because you have your ground game down. The only thing that would be a little bit more problematic is obviously if you're not running a mini P.E.K.K.A, but you could also use Archers or a Witch to shut that down. So it's not necessary. I mean, you can always sub out the Valkryie, but Valkyrie is really good against the Skeleton Army and other troops, so it's very viable there. Now, next up, when you get to Arena 2, there's a couple cards that really do stand out. You have the Minions, you have the Skeletons, you have the Balloon, and you have a Tombstone. Now, Molt obviously would like the Giant Skeleton. I don't really factor that to be a very powerful card because it can be shut down a lot of ways. I think Bomb Tower is also in there, but Bomb Tower, even with the buffs, I think is just very underused right now. But Minions are one of the first flying cards. You could obviously replace them with Archers. You can use them with Archers. You can even have a little cheap Cycle deck that kind of looks something like this, and it'd probably work pretty well, assuming that you have something to help finish off higher stuff. You can have Spear Goblins, and you can even run a Giant in with it. You probably don't even need a Bomber in that deck. And it would probably work pretty well. Because you have a lot of stuff that just harasses stuff. Like, if an opponent places a mini P.E.K.K.A, you can place a Tombstone down. It basically cancels out the mini P.E.K.K.A. And you get a positive elixir trade. If they're running minions, you can just throw Archers behind your tower and it's a win-win. You have the Knight that can soak up stuff. And you have a Giant that can just pank and spec. Obviously, it's not going to 3-crown. Like, for example, if you ran a Prince with a Giant, along with, say, you take the 1 Elixir Skeletons, but 1 Elixir Skeletons, in my opinion, are a high skill card, just like the Graveyard. And if you know how to use it, it's going to work really well for you. Now, in Arena 3, you're going to run into 3 cards that I think are pretty good. You also run into a Barb Hut. I don't think they're pretty good. At low levels, the Barbs are really good. The Cannon, obviously, is amazing just to help distract Hogs. And you get the Rocket. The Rocket is a really powerful card because it takes out medium health characters like Valkyries. It's also great for taking out Goblin Huts. And you can get a hit on the tower if they place it stupidly. Really good for shutting down Barb Huts for positive elixir trade if you're able to clip some Barbs. But these 3 cards obviously stand out in Arena 3. You also get dumb cards like the Barbarian Hut, the Crossbow, and the Rage, which if you're running Minion Horde in Arena 4 actually works out really well. So some of the cards that are really good in Arena 4, you have the Minion Horde. Hog Rider now becomes an option, of course, unless somebody's running a cannon. Tesla you can use as well. And Arena 4 is obviously where you get the P.E.K.K.A. If you're really lucky, you can get a Lava Hound. And you can also get an Inferno Tar, which is a direct counter to the P.E.K.K.A. And you cannot play a Zap until Arena 5. So a lot of people would probably be rocking Inferno Tars, even though it's 5 Elixir. But these are the 4 main cards that you run into in Arena 4. And if you're really feeling high skill, you can use a freeze spell. Obviously, if you're running a Graveyard, you kind of want to have it, but freeze can get you that little chip damage and be annoying. Definitely a good deck to master. Now, once you run into Arena 5, you get some really cool options in Spell Valley. You get the Fire Spirits. You then also get a Zap. And you also get the Wizard. There we go. And a really annoying card, in my opinion, kind of like Ice Wizard annoying, is the Valkryie. Now, obviously, if you're really, really lucky, you're going to get the Graveyard in Arena 5. You're also going to get the Ice Wizard if you're really lucky, kind of like I did out of a Legendary chest on my third account. And I actually hit Arena 9 of it. So these are some of the important cards. Poison can also be situationally useful. And you also get the Graveyard, which is a really, really powerful card. You also run into the Mirror, which is a very, I'd say, high skill ability too, because it helps you mirror. Actually, somebody mirror Elite Barbs on me to actually 3-crown me once. So it doesn't work all the time, but when it does, it's super annoying and super powerful. So these cards will definitely change your deck significantly, especially once you get the Furnace, the Wizards, the Zap, and the Fire Spirits. Poison, not really so much. But there are situations it's useful. If you know the opponent's playing Skeleton Army, you can use a Poison, time it right. It kills their skeletons, it kills their minion horde. Poison is definitely a situational spell, less so than Arrows and Zap, which are a little bit more useful. But these spells are really when the game starts to take a turn. Once you hit Arena 5 at 1,400 trophies, I believe it is, this is when you start getting a lot of the fun cards. Now, speaking of some interesting cards out of Arena 6, we have the Elixir Collector, we have the Tornado, which if you're lucky, you would be getting one of those. You also get the Battle Ram, which is brand new as of a couple months ago. It's a really interesting card because if somebody's not running a building and you catch them off guard, it's a lot of damage to the tower. And even if they do hit the ram, it's still 2 barbs that spawn. This is also when you get the Golem, which in my opinion is very skilled. Nick at Night, obviously a pro with the Golem. I obviously am not. And if you're super lucky, Arena 6 is when you can get the Miner. And you can also get one of the most annoying but good cards in the game, the Log. So these are some of the cards that you can obviously use. Tornado works really well with a card that you get in Arena 9, known as the Executioner, because the Tornado will help pull everything in so the Executioner can make a clean kill on it. Very good if people are spreading out Musketeers, Ice Wizards, Archers. It clumps them all together and it works really well. Obviously you need a heavy card to help back up the Executioner, but it works really well. So once you hit Arena 6, you deal with these 6 cards, not the Graveyard and the Mirror, and you could pull off some crazy stuff if you manage to get a Log. And Elixir Pump Golem is really good, and you might even be able to find the Battle Ram in some decks. Minions, obviously, great with the Miner. You could even use the Goblin Gang in Arena 9. You could even throw regular Goblins in. But if you're really skilled, the Miner is definitely the card for you. Now, when you hit Arena 7, obviously, I was way in Arena 7. You get some annoying cards that you're probably going to run into, and for a while, the Royal Giant was just an utter piece of crap. He would just get to the bridge and die. But since they upgraded the range, now the card is definitely where it's intended. And you also get this little bugger, which is a pretty good card, also known as the Mega Minion. So you get those 3 cards, and you also get a card that I feel is really skillful. If somebody's playing Lightning or a Fireball, it completely shuts it down. But the 3 Musketeers can be a pretty good card. And you also get another card that obviously gets destroyed by Wizards, but if not, or a Bomber, if you don't run any like splash damage, guards can do some amazing stuff and it can distract extremely well. I had somebody throw on guards to distract my P.E.K.K.A. while the Wizard was shooting at the tower, killed my P.E.K.K.A. The Wizard got like 1,000 damage off, but it did some good stuff. So some other cards that are really rare to find that you will get in Arena 7 are the Princess. And you get probably my new favorite card in the game outside of the P.E.K.K.A. being the Electro Wizard. Now, the Electro Wizard is a really interesting card because obviously when it spawns, it's a zap. But I've been finding myself more often than not using it offensively to support a P.E.K.K.A. or a larger unit. I've even used it in my second account. My third account does not have it. So the Electro Wizard, a really good card and definitely one you definitely want to pick up. Now, Arena 8 does offer a couple extra options. You have the Ice Spirit. You also have the Bowler. And you also have one of the most skilled cards in the game, in my opinion, and that is the Ice Golem. 2 Elixir is just like the Knight. It kind of just there to soak up damage. And that's just it right there. You obviously get the Lumberjack and the Dark Prince. I don't think either of those cards are really, you know, they're really situational. You could probably make them work in a specialized deck, but if you're running Dark Prince, other than the charge damage, I think the Valkryie, even though a slower card, is actually a little bit more versatile than a Dark Prince. I just think that it's a little bit too clunky. Like, it needs to be like 360 degrees like the Valkryie to be useful. But when you're running a card like the Ice Golem, or even Ice Spirits is a good cycle card, even with skeletons, if you want to make your deck super cheap to get to your bigger stuff easier, like, for example, a Bowler, Giant, Mega Minion, Lightning, which is really popular. Now, in Arena 9, there's a couple cards that do stand out. Goblin Gang also works pretty well if the opponent's Zap or arrows are on cooldown. Same thing with the Dart Goblin. And then another card out of Arena 9 which is really busted, the Executioner. Obviously, the Clone Spell is also there, but the Clone Spell is really super situational, and if you don't know how to play it, it's going to cost you games really quick. But if you're mirroring giant skeletons that actually get to the tower, well, number one, you're probably doing something wrong. Number two, your deck is not heavy enough to counter giant skeletons from getting your tower, or the opponent's playing smaller stuff like cycle decks, and minion hordes will just shred you in half. Things like Infernal Towers obviously wouldn't work well with that. So, once Arena 10 comes out, you're going to have access to the Heal spell, and in a couple of days, you're going to have access to the Bandit if you didn't get 12 wins in the challenge. I think I got 5, and I'm not going to waste gems trying to do it when I can just get it probably cheaper in the shop. So these are some cards and some really noticeable ones. Obviously, some good decks from Arena 1. I kind of showed you one. It has the Giant, the Valkryie. I like to run 2 spells in basically every deck, so you would have Fireball and the arrows. I think Lightning is super situational. Obviously, it does work really well against Musketeers, but you would probably have something like this in Arena 1. You'd have a deck that something looks like this. You could also have the Musketeer for a little bit of extra range, which is good. Baby Dragon is really good. There's a couple cards that you can make a little bit flexible. This one's probably a little bit heavy and slow, so you probably want, instead of a Valkyrie, you probably want to have Spear Goblins. Hope that they don't have a skeleton army to melt you. Back in the day, it used to cost 4 elixir, and nobody played it, but now that it costs 3, it is a lot more manageable. Arrows would be an even trade, and yeah, some good stuff. So once you get to Arena 2, you then have to you have the option to replace your Spear Goblins with minions. You have the option to replace your archers with minions. Keep in mind they can be arrowed, and even level archers cannot, so use that to your discretion. You can even build a deck like that. Still works pretty solid. And you could even have a building just to kind of distract a little bit further. So you could even go like this, and you'd probably be okay with it for an Arena 2 deck, assuming you don't have a Witch. So once Arena 3 comes out, you probably do want to grab Barbs, because it is a solid card. So you could either take out the Knight, or you could probably take out the Tombstone in that case. And obviously if you have a Witch, that's better than both of them because of all the trades that you can make. So once you hit Arena 4, that's when things really start to get interesting, because then you could run into decks that run things like this. You can have a Hog Rider. You could even run a Valkyrie. You could run Musketeer. You have the nice little trifecta going. You could even throw 1 Elixir Skeletons to distract. And you could have a Cannon instead of Tombstone. And yeah, you have some pretty good stuff. And if you're really skillful and lucky, you could even have a Goblin Barrel instead of 1 set option, just to kind of get out the arrow zap bait, and you could have some crazy stuff. So once Arena 5 hits, you can have even more fun with that. You can throw a Furnace in your deck. You can have a Giant. You can have a good cycle with archers. And you can probably even throw arrows, and something like this would probably work decently well. You obviously don't want the Goblin Barrel, but you could have something like that, and you'd have 2 buildings to shut down basically anything. And that's probably a solid deck as long as the Witch doesn't get overrun. You might want something heavier. Obviously, if you get 3 crowns, you might want to go with Barbs instead of a Furnace. But hey, everybody plays differently. Basically, just try to find out what you're playing against. And if you get countered, you can obviously change a couple things around. If you find you're running the skeleton armies all over the place, you could probably go with a Zap. instead of that. You could even run a wizard, but you can make all kinds of decks. This is the deck that obviously pushed me to Arena 8, and I didn't even use a building. Basically, I just used barbs to shut down the Hog Rider. I would have lightning to deal with musketeers, ice wizards, and stuff, and I didn't even run a zap. I ran a lightning. Sometimes it works against you when you have an infernal tower, but that's some good stuff. And if you want to modify it even more, instead of minions, you can run Electro Wizard, or you can run the good old trusty Ice Wizard, just to slow down as well, and a little bit more durable than the Electro Wizard, obviously, to your point. But yeah, a deck like this could probably work decently well until Elite Barbs come out, at which point you probably need the regular Barbs for that. But yeah, basically the best decks and kind of teching for various arenas will help you out quite a bit. That's a deck that I've actually had a lot of fun with. You can obviously change out the poison for either a heavier spell or a lighter spell, but I've actually had a lot of fun with this deck because the Giant and the Witch will go up in there, and then you have the Electro Wizard and Ice Wizard down, and there's just not much they can do. The Dark Goblin is annoying. You have to log or arrow it down, and then you have the Archers to follow up. So that's a fun deck. And then obviously we have the P.E.K.K.A deck, which I've used to get to 4,000 trophies. I've fallen a little bit from that, but it's a fun deck. It's a really difficult one to play. I really think that the Electro Wizard is a lot of skill and a really fun card. Once you get that card, once you get a minor, it really changes the way to play the game. These legendaries definitely change your gameplay, except if you get a Sparky. Don't ever use that piece of crap. If you like this video showing you some of the cards and decks that you should be using at various arenas, please give this video a like rating, comment, subscribe, share this video amongst your friends, and as a favorite, check out my other Clash Royale videos playlist, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch, which are all HollywoodShono. And obviously, I'm not a pro at 4,000 plus trophies or legendary arena stuff, so obviously my gameplay might be skewed from the pros. If it is, leave your comments below, and maybe I'll even make a deck based around these cards and show them off. Have a wonderful day, kids.
www.youtube.com/HollywoodShono. Subscribe, bitches!